Welcome to the August 8th Planning Board meeting of the Town of Raymond. The Planning Board will come to order. The board does have a quorum. Can I have a roll call, starting with my left?
Ed Cranich.
Kyle Bancroft.
Greg Foster.
Sheila Burke.
Tricia Beaton. Danielle Stumper.
This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all of the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chairwoman if you are unable to see or hear. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's item in the following order. Plan review. Number one was David Baker, Alfred Mann Drive. That item has been deferred to September 12th. Secondly, the applicant Albert Frick, 12 and 18 Westview Drive. Request for amendment to subdivision, Westview Estate subdivision. Then we'll be taking consideration of applications for an open positions on the planning board. We're going to do some planning for ordinance workshops. Then we'll have planner communications followed by adjournment. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances. After the board votes on the merits of each project application, it will prepare a written notice of decision. Generally speaking, appeals must be filed with the Superior Court within 30 days of this board's decision. Also, to be certain that you preserve your individual rights to file any such appeal, you must be certain that this board's record evidences your participation this evening. So all persons speaking, including representatives of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand, state their name, address, and affiliation with the project, if any. You must sign the sign-in sheet, which is in the back. If you are speaking tonight, all persons shall speak through or address the chairwoman. Okay, so we are now open. We have no minutes tonight, so our first applicant is Albert Frick, the request for amendment to the subdivision. So we'll have that presentation.
Chair, would you like this to be pointed right like this?
I'm good. I'm good.
I met with most of the neighbors on Saturday the 8th, and we went over this, so it'll be somewhat of a repetition for many of the neighbors. And we talked a little bit about this on the pre-application meeting, so I'll briefly give an executive summary of what we're proposing. The project is at the far end of Westview Drive off of Route 85. There was an existing phase 1 of the subdivision that was approved in 1986 by the Raymond Planning Board. And that includes all the lots on the paved existing town-approved road to the cul-de-sac, which is right here. The code enforcement officers, since that time, had allowed lots to be broken off and sold and permitted for construction. And Lot A, which was sold and currently is owned by Napolitano, right here, was built in 2001. The house is there, a single-family dwelling on an existing lot. In 2006, my son, Brady Frick, built on what is now 48B. That was issued by permits with Jack Cooper for a single-family dwelling, and it was done with permits. In 2010, my son Colin Frick built his house on this lot, which is 48C, and that too was done by permits through Chris Hansen and previous code officer.
Will Cook.
Will Cook, exactly. Because it took some time for that to be built. In June 13th, I went in to see Jim and Scott to discuss what, if anything, I needed to provide for sale of the other lots. And at that point in time, Jim and Scott advised me that it would be needed to go to subdivision for an amended approval, and that's why we're before you today. And the proposal is for 3 lots that we call proposed Lot D, E, and F. And they are, F is 1 acre in size, right here, and fronts on the existing gravelled way of Westview Drive, which is not a public road. Lot E is 2.59 acres here, which also has frontage on the gravelled way. And Lot F is on the northwesterly side of the road, has frontage on the gravelled portion of Westview Drive, and is proposed to be 1.68 acres. I own the fee simple, the property under the easement, and these 2 existing lots that are owned by the Gliddens and Taylor Acosta have deeded pedestrian and vehicle rights of way on a 50-foot right of way. So the footprint, and there's some discussion, private versus public roads, and we had that discussion in the pre-application meeting. The footprint of the impervious surface is very close existing to proposed. There's a very wide gravel base there. I measured 19 feet wide. As you know, the proposed public road would have to be 20, and a gravel road would be approximately the same width. So there wouldn't be very little, if no, added impervious area to this design. The road access will be in the deeded right-of-way, which is pinned and existing. And we've shown some proposed house sites that are central to the lots and proposed septic and well exclusion areas on the plan. And we're more than 4,000 feet to Panther Pond and more than 3,000 feet to Hayden Brook. So we discussed this with the planning board last meeting. It appears we're exempt from phosphorus control, but we're offering a forested buffer in locations that are down gradient from the development. And that's a brief summary of what's being proposed.
Okay. Planning board members, do you have questions based on what you've read in the presentation?
I have a
Go ahead,
minor
Ed.
technical point. On the drawings, there are no elevations, at least the drawings I have, on the contours, so it's sort of hard to follow them. Do you have another layer on your file that you could just...
We could put
them-
the NGVD contours on that. We can do that at the next.
Yeah, it probably should be on there, I think,
Yeah,
because you can't
no.
tell if it's a hole or a hill.
No, well, we can easily do that.
Okay.
It's my understanding that we do not have engineering diagrams for the road extension at this time. Is that correct?
That is correct. Bill Walsh is my civil engineer from Walsh Engineering, and he's scheduled to be out there Friday, August 10th, and to look at that and do the design. I'm going to invite Nate White. Jim and I met with him as far as discussion of private road and public road and sub-bays. So we're going to document the subgrade depths, and Bill Walsh would be the engineer. We'll be in the process of designing the road, the profile, and the plan view, and any stormwater that's needed. The impervious area is going to be, as I said, pretty close to what's out there existing. It might have to shift a little bit towards the center of the alignment because of the traveled way is close to the easterly sideline.
Okay. On behalf of the plan board, I'd like to thank you for a very nice packet.
Thank you.
And the consideration of adding buffer zones when it really isn't required by ordinance. I'd like to thank you for that. On behalf of the planning board, however, without that engineering diagram, the application, in my opinion, is incomplete. Before we move to that, I'd like to ask Jim for his comments on where we're at.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that the gravel drive is essentially in place. I understand we may have some slight adjustments. Piece of it, based on the information we just received, is a little bit outside the right of way, so there'll have to be a little bit of a shift in the road. Nothing major. To Al's point, I think impervious surfaces are gonna match almost what's actually out there at this point. So I understand that, they have to do the engineering drawings, we'll have to verify the road base if they want to reuse that base, and that's fine. We can schedule this to be final, for final approval in September. But at this point, this was scheduled for a public hearing. I do think it would be appropriate with, participants who are here to take public comment and see what their concerns are. And then after that, we can go into a little bit of some of the things I've picked up in the memo.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to open the meeting now for public comment. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
I've got a few comments.
You need to come to the mic. Did you sign in, sir?
I'm not.
Okay, make sure you sign in. You can do that afterwards.
Okay.
Just state your name and your relationship to the project.
My name is Sam Glidden. I live at 18 Westview Drive, at the end of Westview Drive Extension. I've got some diagrams that I've prepared. One I could give to each one of you, if that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
You're at the very end.
Yes, I am. New to town.
Thank you.
You want to use it?
So what I gave to you, it's not really made for a presentation. It's lacking a lot of information as far as the title of what and whatnot, but I can give you a little overview about it. What I wanted to demonstrate was sort of the areas of disturbance that are on the existing lots. The average disturbance for each lot over all the lots that front on Westview Drive is about 26%. And Al has spoke that he would like to match the feel of the neighborhood as such, and he's positioned new structures on these lots on his concept appropriately. But I'd like to discuss the potential of kind of memorializing the idea of meeting the existing feel of the neighborhood on the plan, in the form of buffers from existing lot lines, specifically along the Payne property, as well as the Napolitano property.
Sir, could you reference, based on your diagram, whether we're talking about 3, 2, B, C, D, instead
Sure.
of names? That would
Sure.
be helpful. Because you've got it labeled pretty well here.
Yeah. I was speaking about.
Does he want this mic? Can I give it?
a microphone.
We're
Yeah.
bringing the mic out.
Oh, sorry.
It's a brave new world.
It's Oz.
Thank you.
So specifically, I'm speaking about Lot D and Lot A on my plan. And if you notice, as you come up Westview Drive, many of these structures are set back from the drive, which afford a buffer from the road. So, you know, obviously not all the structures are that way, and many of them have a significant forested buffer to the existing lot lines, which really goes to the character of the neighborhood as being a forested subdivision. And given that the zoning has changed since the subdivision was approved in '86, and I really can't speak to what the zoning was at the time. I haven't done that research. But you know, now we've got 3 lots, which 1 and 2 of them are significantly smaller than the existing subdivision lots, which obviously is not a problem based on zoning, but it certainly could change the character of the neighborhood. If, for instance, these lots were sold and clear-cut prior to being developed, which I don't think any of the abutters would like to see. So is it appropriate, you know, for this planning board to suggest that there be, you know, forested buffers towards the existing lot lines? I'm not sure, but I thought it was a point to make, you know, that many of these lots are approximately 26% is the average over all these lots to what the disturbance is at this point. So I've got some other comments, but if you'd like to discuss that at all.
What did the size change from
You
5
you
to
need
2
to,
acres?
you have to go to the mic and state who you are and
Alice, formerly Burse, of Art and Ann Burse on Gore Road, 27 and 31 Gore Road. When did the lot size change from 5 acres for building to 1.5, 2 acres? Because I know when I built at 27, it had to be 5.
2014 was the last, I believe, zoning change.
Yeah, I don't think it.
I don't know if that's when that happened or
I'll
not.
look through the ordinance. It should happen under the
hold on 1 second.
amendment.
It has changed.
No,
a few years.
that's obvious. I'm only recently back, you know, in Maine, back on my folks' property. And I noticed that in the maps, they still have it as Burse, and my dad died 20 years ago, and my mom is remarried. So it's no longer Burse.
I think it was in '05 that the change actually occurred.
05, okay.
5/21/05.
Because I built in 04. 27, I knew at that point it had to be
Yep.
5, and I just was like, when did that change?
Yep, it was soon after, I guess.
And I'm assuming that the tangent there on the top left corner is 85 on your map, sir? Correct?
Yes.
Excuse me?
I'm assuming
Yes.
this is 85.
Yes.
How far up here is Gore Road? You don't know.
It's quite a distance, but I don't know the exact.
Excuse me, we need to be at microphones because it's being recorded and broadcast.
Oh, where are we being broadcast to?
I think I'm mic'd up, that's why.
Yeah,
Yes,
you're my
You are.
God.
I was not. I was not.
It's quite a distance up there. It's outside of the, you know, the scope of the subdivision, and it's quite a distance, but I don't know the exact mileage.
Because I don't commute that way, so I don't go by your road very often. That's why I was like,
Do you have any other comments or questions?
I wish I had a bigger picture of what was there at this point. And I will sign in, but I did not.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to give the board some reference, that lower corner, that lower left corner, that road that kind of loops in a little bit, that's actually Davis Farm Road, just to give you some
Gotcha.
reference. So it's actually closer to Davis Farm Road than it is to Gore Road.
This is Sam again. So it was my impression from the last meeting that the planning board doesn't have any opinion whether or not the road should be public or private. But I'd like to make a few comments to that. This morning I sent an email to Al that delineated a few reasons why myself and another one of the abutters to the subdivision have given our opinion that we would prefer to see it be a public way, for what it's worth. And a few of those comments were things that were really beneficial to the landowners as well as Al, so that they're not really pertinent to this board, I don't believe. But a few of them are, so I think I'll recite them, if you don't mind. So one thing that would be interested to know, and I'm not sure how this plays out, is if there is a public way extended up through Westview Drive extension, whether or not a school bus would be able or could be requested to come up to that hammerhead and turn around, which if that was the case, that would have positive implications to both the landowners in Westview Drive extension as well as the other owners on Westview Drive. As of now, kids are picked up at Route 85, which to some parents, I'm sure they're comfortable with letting their kids go to Route 85 down, what for me would be approximately 1,400 foot of safe neighborhood, but otherwise, there's poison ivy along the way, or whatnot. Maybe that's not a comment for this board, but furthermore, my wife Elena, who lives with me at the 18 Westview Drive, is the operator of Saplings Childcare out of our house. And if that was a public way and a school bus would be able to come to the end, do its route, it would be a benefit to Elena as well as the town, because she would be able to provide care to kindergarten and school age children before and after school, as well as kindergarten kids which go part-time, which I think would be a benefit, as they would add the potential for more quality childcare in the town. Whereas, if it is the way it is, the status quo, without significant changes to the business plan that we have, you wouldn't be able to provide those extra spots to children. So I think that would be a benefit, certainly for the neighborhood as well as the town. The next point is, so Westview Drive, the public portion is about 1,100 feet long, which is approximately 1,020 feet plus an 80-foot temporary turnaround per the 1986 subdivision plan. This stretch of Westview Drive has 8 houses on it. Now this extension would be approximately 325 feet from the end of the paved portion, and you would be then placing a potential of 5 residences on that portion of the road. But also on the subdivision plan, there's a note about that temporary turnaround, which is in fact where the cul-de-sac currently is constructed. It's all constructed within that temporary turnaround. It says on the plan that upon the extension of Westview Drive, that turnaround should be discontinued. And I'm not sure if that pertains to a public extension or a private extension or either. So if that was the case, you'd have then, if it was discontinued, you'd have 6 houses that would be fronting on this private portion, which would be about 410 feet if you excluded the Westview Drive extension, the turnaround, that houses the cul-de-sac. Whereas you'd have 6 owners on the 1,000-foot portion. So that difference in ratio, I think, speaks to the benefit of it. Well, speaks to the fact that it would be appropriate in my mind that it would be a public way. Furthermore, it's apparently that portion of Westview Drive was constructed at the same time as Westview Drive Public. I guess in 1986, per Al's comment, that to me privately was that the Westview Drive extension portion was constructed at the same time. And you couple that fact with the note on the plan, it seems easy to come to the conclusion that Westview Drive extension was always deemed to be a public extension. Whether or not that comes to fruition out of my hands, but I thought it was a comment to make regarding that. I have no comments further.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional public comments? Questions? No? Then I'm going to close the public comment portion of the meeting. Jim, would you like to take us through some of the items at issue? And correct me if I'm wrong, the planning board does not decide whether we accept a street as a public way. that's outside of our authority.
Correct. All we can do is, or all the applicant can do is offer to build the road to the public standard, and then it's up to the select board to determine if they want to accept it. My understanding is that even though it's gravel right now, the town has accepted, and I'm assuming it's up to that portion just before the, I don't know if you want to call it a loop or kind of oval that's at the end of the road. I believe that's town accepted to that point, but I do believe the town does plow that in the winter to the end of that gravel section. So I think it's a couple scenarios that could happen. One, the town, if it was built to the public standard, could accept it. We'd have to go to the town select board to the end with the hammerhead, or it could say it doesn't want to accept it and would remain private, and they could enter into a winter maintenance contract for the plowing, which is probably likely if it's not going to be publicly accepted. And then it would be in a sort of an association at that point for those owners off of the end, those 6 lots. So it does, you know, to Mr. Glidden's point, it does have some complexities going forward, but to your point, that's really not the job of this board. And he is right that in the previous subdivision plan, that was a temporary turnaround, so it obviously appears in 1986 that they had some ideas of, you know, a second phase or extension of this. And just for clarity, for the purposes of the board, the 2 lots that were carved out and have home, one which is Mr. Glidden, I believe, now resides in, should have at one point come back in, because they were family lots, so the division of the lot itself, the deeding of the lot was something they could have done, but they altered the plan, and as soon as you alter the plan, technically you're supposed to come back to the board. Board probably wouldn't have had much latitude other than this section of road for the creating of the frontage would have been the only thing. So it should have probably come back in here for extension of the private way at that time. So at this point, we are kind of capturing the other 2 lots and the 3 proposed just to clean this thing up once and for all.
Yeah.
So to your point, one of the issues that we have is we're waiting for the actual design of the road extension itself. As I said, it's probably going to mimic what's going on with the gravel surface right now, with a turnaround that'll have to meet the town standards at the end. And until we see that, we really don't understand what the issues could be with drainage.
But Mr. Frick has stated in his project narrative that you're going to create that to the standard of a town public road. So
Correct.
once we get all that information, then it's ripe for further discussion.
Yes, but I'm wavering a little bit on a public road. There's a few moving pieces here with regards to what's going to be needed per the engineer with stormwater and drainage. I know what the proposed cost of the road is. I've asked, as far as sprinkling or fire suppression, there'd be a cost added. So I'm trying to make these lots nice but reasonable for in the setting of a middle class, very nice neighborhood. So based on the engineer's advice and so forth, I may be coming in here with plans that'll show a graveled road. I'm not certain right now.
Right.
Listen to the neighbors, and we're trying to finalize that.
Okay. Any additional comments, Jim?
I'll grab my memo real quick here. Going just down through the subdivision criteria real quick. I do believe in one of the packets we did have topography on, at least one of the copies I had, I believe there was some topography on one of the plans that I saw.
There was, Jim, but the gentleman was right, the contouring, the MPVD elevation,
Okay.
I need to add.
No,
Okay.
it has
And that's-
contours, but not the
Yeah.
elevations,
Right.
right.
Okay. Water supply, these will be domestic wells, and They did request, which the board kind of gave direction on as far as the waiver for the HHE 200s based on the test pit, and we're fully on board with that, and I believe the board gave kind of a
Yes.
nod for that, but we'll take a formal motion when we go forward with that. They provided an erosion control plan. I had one question. With the original subdivision, are you aware or were you aware of any wetland applications that were needed for fill permits at that time, or were they not required? I just wondered from a cumulative effect of the wetland filling.
That predates NERPA, Jen.
Okay, so
And
I expected.
I'm not aware because the road comes up, it's an up through nice upland
Yep.
glacial till.
Yep.
So your comments on the review, the driveway crossing is the proposed driveway crossing is the only wetland fill that's
Perfect.
needed. With the crossing over the stream, the minor water course was done under a stream crossing that allows for 25, a
Yep.
little bit of wetlands on each side is absorbed in that stream crossing.
No, into the board's rationale, I was just trying to make sure that,
Right.
it was a cumulative impact on the wetlands, and just want to make sure we didn't trip anything that would require us to,
Yeah, I
notify
think
DEP.
in the written narrative, he talked specifically about that with some measurements, and it's almost identical
Yeah.
in terms of,
As I mentioned, we're waiting on the road design. There's just some notes as you go down through these comments that we'll probably just have to add to the subdivision plan with regards to certain, aspects of the subdivision criteria. Solid waste, sewage disposal, things
Correct.
like that. Ability to serve town services. We did not get any letters from wildlife, but based on the development through there, I'm not sure if the board wants to take that up, if there's any particular habitats or concerns with any type of protected wildlife. We do have a historic preservation letter, which basically said there's nothing of no impact to that. And then financial and technical capacity. Based on the limited amount of work up there, we'll just ask for a bond to be established for the road construction at the time. And that'll have to be done prior to any issuance of building permits.
correct. Okay.
And that, again, these will all be notes, Al, that we can kind of go over, that'll have to be on the drawing. I think everything else is pretty clean. Stormwater, I don't really have any major concerns, but again, until we see that final road design, it's
Right.
tough to figure out. But I think his proposal at this point makes sense. We just need to wrap it in with the road design to make sure that we can actually do that and we don't have any, areas where we're discharging. My only final comment is to the gentleman that spoke with regards to buffer requirements. Under these type of subdivisions, we typically don't have a buffer requirement. If it were a cluster, it might be a little bit different around the external property line. And to that point, it's a little more difficult given that the zone change allows for the smaller lots to fit the buffer in. I would just, it might be something that Al and himself would have to consider about as far as maybe putting some kind of limitation on the amount of clearing per lot to again help address the stormwater impacts. Maybe to 15,000 square feet or something like that. And maybe just give us some idea of what he's considering for a building window or a building envelope.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, if we
try to
could
preserve as much as
get an
we
idea of those envelopes again.
and driveway locations. And I think we've already kind of
Right.
worked out the driveway locations. But if we had some kind of a concept, and I know we're not going to hold you to because the homeowners can do whatever they want once they buy the lot, but if at least we had some concept to understand what would be going in. I think the only one that's going to be a little bit tricky would be
The skinny one.
the F. Is
Yeah.
that
The
that's
skinny one.
the skinny one. The others have ample opportunity to buffer. And now, will you be building these or will you be out sale?
Either or, I'm
Okay.
sorry. But to speak into that, I mean, I'm striving to keep it in, it's a very nice neighborhood, nice buffering. I actually helped on the clearing of the two, Mr. Glidden and the other one, as far as keeping them tucked in the woods. And I was on part of the design team for phase one with the septic. So Our intention is not to, to clear cut it, but until you have a house design and out garage locations and things of this sort, it's, as you understand, it's hard to
difficult,
fix it exactly on the plan, but we have no intentions to clear cut right up to the sidelines, and we want to keep the privacy that the neighborhood has. Yeah.
Does your drawing up there show a vegetated buffer between E and B? I believe it does.
Yes, it does. It has the stormwater buffer right there.
Right there, and then we have one downslope from the road right here.
Right.
It's acting more as a, for phosphorus and, treatment. But this buffer was provided to the Gliddens. It's on the other side of the wetlands. There'd be no reason to cross wetlands to use that. So we're trying to afford as much buffering that can be easily granted without complicating the window
I
sites.
think that addresses one of Mr. Glidden's concerns, or a good portion of it.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing here is everybody has good intentions. It's very difficult to judge something that isn't really designed yet. And that process will continue. As far as the planning board is concerned, at this point, we don't feel the application is complete, and we would defer it till September, and hopefully we'll have everything wrapped up. We'll be making notes on the plan. And again, Mr. Glidden, as things move forward, providing this all comes together, there'll be individual building permits per lot where there'll be, up to our code enforcement officer to take it home. And you'll get a lot more detail at that time. You'll be able to really see what's going on.
So as I understand it, from what I hear and when I read through Jim's notes, I owe the board the NGBD, the elevations on the topo plan is lacking. The engineered design of the road, certification of the subsoil,
Right.
and Bill Walsh's plan for drainage and so forth. There's some suggested notes that Jim had suggested added. I went through those. I found those to be no problem. And that's what I'm seeing as the punch list is.
Yeah, and just maybe a discussion with Mr. Walsh or whoever's going to do the road design about what their intentions are with that package for stormwater from the road itself.
Right.
If there's any-
I did have some conversation with Bill. Of course, he hasn't been up there and looked at it, but
Right.
he thought that with the width of the road and the minimal, if any, difference in impervious, that he could perhaps handle it on the westerly side of the right-of-way.
Okay.
All right, but that's to be determined.
Correct, yep. And just one final thing is, even if Mr. Frick turns this over to a private road association, again, the private road association also has the opportunity, if they so want to take the risk, that they could, once they acquire the road, they could complete it, pave it, and solicit it to the town as a public road as well. Some risk in there, because we've seen that this board of selectmen has not really accepted many roads. In this case, this one's a little bit more difficult to get a
Little bit of
grasp on,
history in there, but.
because a portion of it's already been accepted. So,
Right.
so that's
And that was a little bit of the dilemma when I first asked you on the workshop. And so the neighbors will understand, to go all the way down through, and then if the selectmen chose not to adopt it, then we have to circle back. What we have done, we have designated an area for plowing easement on my property that's at the hammerhead, so that there's a allowance for the public works to plow and not interfere with the driveways.
And the only other final note that we have to capture, we got to start remembering this in all the plans now, is our sunset provision for
Correct.
the approvals and lapsing and things like that. So if you don't have that, I can give you that point in the ordinance where that's located.
And are you in on just Wednesday afternoons?
It'll be, well, next week I'm on vacation, but following that, I'm usually on Thursday afternoons except for days of the planning board meeting. I'm in Wednesdays.
So next Thursday afternoon?
I'm on vacation.
Is there a way that can you email me?
Yeah, I will email you the piece. I'll actually
All
email
right,
it to you.
thank you.
Okay, then we're all set for tonight. Thank you for coming
Thank you
and
very
spending your
much.
time. Thank you. And we'll see you next month. Okay. Do we need to vote to table it?
You probably should just go through the
Okay.
formal motion.
Can I have a formal motion to table the Albert Frick request for amendment to subdivision?
Yeah, I move that the application is incomplete and we table the applicant's plan till September.
Can I have a second, please? Patricia seconds. All in favor? All
And of
right.
course, that's subject to us getting the
Right,
necessary
I know.
information. The other thing, Al, real quick, you might just want to check with the fire inspector too on anything for fire suppression. Okay.
Okay, moving on. Consideration of applications for open positions on the planning board. Do we have such applicants? Oh, he's changing his mind, is what's going on back there.
He looks really relaxed. I don't know.
I don't know, he's had too much time away, that's it. Robert O'Neill, can you want to come up? A lot of people here don't know you. Bob O'Neill served as, he's at the mic, served as the chairman of this body for more years than he wanted to remember when he decided to take a break. He's been gracious enough to file his paperwork to return to the board. His experience is invaluable. He knows the ins and outs, not only of the ordinances with our fine staff support, but the parliamentary procedures, all those good things. He likes to wield the gavel. So with that, Jim, Bob, would you like to say anything to the board?
No, I think most of you are familiar faces. I've completed my trip. I've gone across the wake, as they say, and I've got my time off. I'm willing to come back if you guys will have me. I'm available.
I would like to move that we submit Bob O'Neill's name to the select board as soon as possible. May I have a second?
Second.
Every third, fourth, fifth, okay, all in favor? All right, thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you.
Stay
Really
tuned.
put him through the ringer.
Stay
huh?
tuned.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Okay, planning for ordinance workshops.
Yes.
Mr. Seymour.
We've got one situation starting with the mobile home moratorium that we have right now in place in the shoreline zoning. It's been kind of brought down to the planning board level to give some kind of interpretation as to direction that we want to go with the moratorium as far as does it make sense to leave it as is? Is there something that can be brought forward to enhance, or do we actually discuss removing it from the shoreline zoning? I think we touched a little bit on it at the end of the last meeting. The concern is right now is that there was some miscommunication based on we call it a cheat sheet at the town that someone created well before all of us that had that mobile homes were not allowed in the shoreline zoning. That was incorrect. We've gone back and looked at all the ordinances going back to as far as we can document, and we have not found that it prohibited those types of dwelling units. And we've gone to the state, and it is not prohibited in the state model ordinance. I've gone in and I've looked at some of the other locales nearby. I've looked at Falmouth, I've looked at Gray, I've looked at, I work in Casco, so I know Casco, Wyndham. In all those communities, they are allowed, not prohibited. So just to give you some feel of what's going on around us, that's the case. I think that also we'll need to put together a workshop to look at the definitions between, and Scott will help us with that, mobile home, manufactured home, modular home, dwelling units. You know, it opens up a whole Pandora's box of different structural and VOCA requirements and so on and so forth. My understanding, and Scott can, you know, give you a little more insight on this, is currently our ordinance allows them, but they have to be placed on a concrete slab
With skirting.
with skirting. So it's not just parked in a gravel lot or on a stone pad. It has to be on a basically poured concrete slab.
And in those situations, do they not have to come before us for siting and septic issues, well issues?
They would, if they're on a
Individual.
lot, then there would be a strict building permit, just like everybody else.
Okay, and we
That's-
just don't have anything like that now, or what's?
Like I said, there is some standards on individual mobile homes, on individual lots. There's a small excerpt, there's a small, in the ordinance, just deals with that. There are definitions of what's allowed in the other ones as far as manufactured home type 1, which is what we're talking about. But there really isn't much in there for, I guess you'd want to say, any kind of guidance in regards to that, other than whether they're allowed or not allowed. Like Jim said, it does change a little bit on, we'll have to, if that's where it comes, we'll have to look at some of the definitions, because some of those could trigger something else. We just have to make sure, kind of follow the whole thing out to make sure that we're covered as far as the interpretation of it.
Currently, the ordinance reads, mobile / manufactured. It's like lumped in a pile, correct?
Yeah, there's a little clarification needs to be done on some of that too, and also where it's located. Some of them will list per, in the zone, they'll say single-family homes, modular homes. And then it'll say other permitted uses. You go down the letter system and you don't see it till the very end. Sometimes it's on a whole nother page that it says manufacturing type 2, type 1.
Okay.
They are, like I said, part of this excerpt too is one of the latest things that they are looking back to see when this excerpt was created and to see at that time, was this voted on during a selectmen's meeting and put in and never was amended or changed, so that means it should have gone forward. We don't know that yet. That's what we're trying to find out.
Okay.
So
So
this-
you're trying to trace the history of how we got to what we have.
Correct, and as far as being on the cheat sheet, because on our current ordinance, it's not there, but was it missed at some point? It should have been there all along. You know, it's just gonna take a little more digging at the clerk.
What would be the purpose of limiting them in the shoreline zone? I mean, is there an advantage to the, I mean,
don't-
other than
That's one
the
of the
obvious
things, is
here?
there has to be like a, what's the crisis that dictates the
Right,
moratorium?
Right. And I think it's more of a, at this point, being bold, I think it's more of a social,
Yes.
Yeah, I
Situa-
would suggest you watch the
yeah,
select board meeting.
The
I only got so
special
much time.
town
Special,
meeting.
yeah, you really should.
yeah,
The
yeah.
special
And I-
town meeting for the
and-
moratorium was
And I think this board
fascinating.
is put in a difficult position because we're dealing with socioeconomic possible discrimination. We also get into a situation, if we prohibit that in the shoreline zone, I'm trying to come up with some numbers for you for another workshop, just saying how much of the town percentage area would we prohibit that type of use if we move forward and actually prohibit that? What does that do to some of our affordable type housing situations as well?
That's one of my major concerns. The other one is specifically targeting the shoreline zone. I think we need our attorney to look at some of this and what sort of case law, because I think it would end up being ripe for a class action suit, even by somebody from outside the town. There's a lot of hairy issues involved in this. On the other side of the coin, if we choose to do nothing, i.e. no prohibition, but clarify our ordinances so they're very clear in these particular cases. The one thing I was surprised at is based on both federal and state law, we're not allowed in these situations, when these buildings are sited, whether they be mobile or manufactured, to have any say on what's inside. That to me was very concerning. You know, we do have ordinances regarding fire safety and things like that inside buildings, in the residential area. So, but again, this is a very complicated issue when it comes to those kinds of things. But if we're in a situation where, this is my personal opinion now, if we're in a situation where we have control over lot siting, over a pad, over test pits, septic, you know, all the kinds of things that we need to protect our area. The other thing is, I don't see anywhere in our ordinances, and correct me if I'm wrong, where we dictate how people keep their lots. There's no beautification standard here in Raymond.
No.
And
Well, you
what
would if
I
you
was,
got, yeah, if you did a development,
Storage.
if you did a development or cluster development, you'd have more latitude to do that on the lot.
Right.
But when you're doing individual lots,
Right.
out sales,
right, because
you've
a
lost.
lot of what I was hearing is they don't particularly like what is, in their opinion, junk on these lots. Well, I'll take you to 50 single-family homes that have that problem. And, you know, something like that in an ordinance, I really think, I'm not sure that would fly at a town meeting. You know, if I want to keep my 1955 Buick on the back 40, I can do that, so.
Well, and I think if we do segregate mobile from modular, from manufactured, today's manufactured homes are not the same as they were just
They
10 years
certainly
ago. You go to Norway and Oxford, and you look at those, and those, you may not be able to tell the difference between those and a stick-built home
Once they're on a
today.
lot, you can't even tell.
Right. So, I mean, and what's to stop somebody from saying, okay, I can go down. This opens up your other question you've asked about with tiny houses as well.
Right.
You know, where, you know, do we have to really redefine, that may be the solution, is just to define in the ordinance some clearer definitions of what's what.
Right.
But I don't think, personally, I don't think we really want to get into prohibiting, but I think we just need more clarity as to what those units are for everybody's purposes. But to your point, how they look and how they function, you're giving up a lot of personal rights for people in that situation.
Exactly, exactly. Well, we do have on our big plan, there are zones for mobile home something.
That's overlay, that's for parks.
The
That's
mobile
for parks.
parks.
Okay.
That's what
Do we
it's-
have those?
Yes, we have one of
See, I
those.
didn't even know that.
What's that?
I think it's
A
just
mobile
one
home park.
lot.
No,
No,
to
Western.
the whole
Yeah,
district.
Louise
Yeah.
Lester's property.
No, it's on the western end of Raymond, on the 302 side. There is an overlay district
Yeah.
there.
And that has a lot, looking through the standards of what we had talked about with the property that I purchased, there's some detail in that MHOD overlay on specifications. And it just seems that if we have, just let's set the rule and carry it across all districts.
Right.
You know, and that's, so you got some of that information already, and then with the manufactured homes, but really, in this day and age, what kind of restriction can we put on manufactured homes? I mean, they're homes that are manufactured, they're built to standard, fire standards.
Right.
I mean, that's a difficult one.
And I think you've already kind of, you've headed that way, requiring them to be on a foundation.
Absolutely.
You know, and the only other thing you can do, which what they already have, is above flood elevation.
Yep.
You know, all those provisions are there. Maybe they just need to be a little more clarified. And to your point, I think it's a wonderful suggestion that we get some input from our legal
Exactly.
folks.
And again, I have to believe that this is not a unique issue here, particularly in the Southern Lakes region, that the other towns have dealt with it. There's probably a lot of ordinances around some of these topics. But honestly, I'd recommend, if we're gonna do it, that we do it across all these different dwelling types, because I'm gonna predict for you, within the next 3 to 5 years, you're gonna have to deal with this tiny house thing. I mean, that sector is growing by leaps and bounds. And some of them are permanent, some of them are on wheels. I mean, it's kind of the same thing,
Yeah,
on a
and I
smaller
think this,
scale.
to the point, I think the state's starting to look at that a little bit too, because how
Right.
does that meet the building code, fire code, you know? Goes across a lot of different lines, because you're
Exactly.
jamming a lot of stuff into a really confined space.
Exactly.
With some of those things, and septic systems with those. you know.
The only thing difference, like with tiny houses and manufactured houses, right now, tiny houses really don't have a universal standard that they
Right.
have to be built by, whereas
Okay.
manufactured homes do. That-
Well, right there, you have something to hang your hat on in terms of permits. Where, you know, if they don't have a national standard, that would leave the regulation of those in our purview. If they do have a national standard, then we're just looking at standard ordinances, lots, you know, and I just don't see any reason to differentiate.
And I think the reason that, up to this point, we probably haven't run into this crisis is unless somebody's had the land in a family for a long period of time,
Right.
the cost of buying land off in the shorefront property prohibits right
Well,
off the bat
that
from.
was my thought. I'm thinking, how many people are gonna
Right.
buy a lot to put a mobile home on it? What, on Sebago? Like,
A lot of
I
people
just don't
surprise
see
me.
that
though.
happening.
Yeah, but I mean, on Sebago is one thing, but you get back into the smaller ponds
Sure.
or smaller
Fancy
streams and
ponds,
things
stuff
like
like
that.
Some of these family properties that have
Right,
been
yeah,
running for
right.
generations, I
Yeah,
can
Want to
see.
help out a sibling or a child or something, you
Exactly.
know, I mean, it might be an economic
Exactly.
value.
So
right?
currently, there's a 90-day moratorium unless extended by the Board of Selectmen, which I have a
100,
feeling.
180.
180,
And they can extend
which I
it
have
one
a
more
feeling,
time.
so, you know.
And
to
if we
our
do
job-
change, and the other flip side of that is that, okay, even if they do come up with something, it's gotta go through a town vote if we change something in the
Right.
ordinance.
So they're going to extend it out till June,
If
either
we
way.
have to change something in the ordinance, they may have to. If we decide to go status quo and keep it as is, then they make a choice whether they want, then they have to make a choice whether they mandate we change something
Yep.
or they go with it, and if anything that changes, we have to go to the town
Okay,
vote.
so to proceed with this, can
Or
we
special town
ask
vote.
Mary to take a look at some of the implications? You're already doing research in other towns.
Yeah,
I think I'd like to see, or the board, I'd like to see some type of narrative summary of what you're finding, so that we have some reference
Yes, I
point.
do have this, I just kind of cut and pasted these. I got these from all places, Falmouth, just to give you a sense, you know, figuring that if, you know,
Yep.
influential homes and everything. This is kind of their definitions. I just kind of started digging this, so I'll just let you have that. You have Warren, and then.
Does the state municipal association, the ones that put on those trainings for these type of boards, do they have like a set of standards, or would they be a resource to use
They
for?
could be a resource. Are we still a member of?
No, we're
We
not.
never have been.
We
No.
never have
Yeah.
been.
I wish we were.
We were, I thought.
Well, not my time.
But they do have publications, and they may be able to give some
You can
information.
buy publications, yeah,
Right.
for the
Um,
non-member price.
Again, I think the state DEP obviously has in their model ordinance the acceptance of them, which is, I think, a very important piece to add. But I think we can take a look at the other towns around us, see what they've run into. I'm guessing the farther west, it's probably less of an issue. As we go east, closer to the coast and dealing with the coastal shoreline zoning, it's probably a little more prevalent. And like I said, I think most of the time, the price of the land is the real catalyst for up or down.
Well, right now, I'm not hearing anybody on the plan board all that anxious to try to regulate these things, but clarity might be good. So I think, you know, just in general, am I misspeaking? I've not heard any that we're not, you know, feeling like we want to jump into trying to write an ordinance to regulate this stuff.
Probably need definitions clarified.
Yeah,
That's-
we should clarify the
Usually address that in
definitions.
comprehension plan anyway.
Right, yeah, and again, we'll go through into the comp plan to see, it's probably, you know, that's outdated as well.
Yeah, well, let me ask another question. The impression I got with the controversy surrounding this one single unit that seems to have raised this whole issue appeared, if I understood correctly, it was a rental property.
I don't know what it was, where it was located before. I know that is the intent of where it's being brought to.
Okay.
Didn't that lady state that at the
Yeah,
hearing?
at the hearing, she says there's renters in there, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't say factual
you-
if that's
Yeah, you
what's going
can't,
on.
but
Yeah.
my question really is in a broader scope in terms of a permanent resident versus rental housing and our regulation around that kind of thing.
That's kind of more or less where legal help would kind of come in, is to see how we can, or if we wanted to approach that.
Yeah, because that's, again, probably not so much in this area. I know the area I came from, that was a huge issue in terms of a lot of single-family homes being turned into rentals. And that opened up a whole new set of regulations regarding the interior of those buildings in terms of safety and everything else. When you have renters coming and going and things like that. Number of cars being parked. I mean, all sorts of stuff.
It's a
more
possibility that
packed
if
area.
they rent that out. I mean, it may fall under, I'm not sure. Like I said, I just might have to look onto. I mean, it depends on the situation and where is it at. Is it just an accessory apartment that they rent out? There's all the accessory apartment definition is just size
Right.
and ability. So a mobile home can be an accessory apartment because you can have it attached or detached.
Yeah.
And as long as it meets that criteria of under 700 feet, there's really nothing saying that it can't be a mobile home on a house with a dwelling unit on there already.
I see.
But back to your point, I think there's a lot of confusion about the differences with manufactured, mobile, modular, all those terms kind of
Yeah.
get rolled into one for a lot of the general public. So I think some definitions as to how they fit, and even if they are grouped into, one pod, that they're still allowed, but a definition of what needs to be done to meet our requirements might be helpful.
Yeah.
Because whether it's a manufactured modular,
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
requirements
Just
are
breaking
the
them out
same.
with definitions
Right.
might be helpful.
Yeah. Well, then the other thing too is I really didn't see I could look again, but I didn't really see any distinction in our ordinance between a mobile home and a manufactured
No,
type one,
it's-
which is a newer.
They're always referred mobile slash.
Some
anything.
places,
Right,
some
yeah.
places, yeah.
And I mean, I was just quickly looking, and even in the comp plan, it discusses, manufactured housing as
Yeah.
a way of affordable housing, so.
Yeah.
I remember it.
You remember it?
Let's see.
Remember it?
With regards to the mobile home or manufactured homes and not having to question what's inside because of the universal code,
Yeah, it's,
would it be
sorry.
would it be something that those rules would be classified as far as years, like anything after this year or
Well, they-
are allowed before this year?
Yeah, they kind of do that now. I mean, that's that whole definition of a type one. It has to be after 1976,
Okay.
and it has to be 14 feet. Then it has a pitched roof. It's basic. It is defined in our ordinance exactly what a manufactured type one that is allowed. But then they go through all that as far as pitch roofs and I can't remember the length of it, but it has to be a certain size, over 750 or 700 square feet or something like that. There are stipulations of what it's got to look like, but most of them meet that anyway.
And to the point, technology and construction has changed much in 20 years, so
Oh, yeah.
now, I mean, when they wrote this, modular homes weren't as popular or as relevant as they are now. I mean, and to that point, I mean, people, like you said, they kind of get them all kind of jumbled up.
That's true. That's true. Seeing some of these manufactured houses literally go on a lot and get built in a day. Just
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
bang. It's amazing to watch.
And,
Okay.
then- and because of the technology and experience, the quality is comparable, if not, I mean, we look
I've
at,
seen some beautiful ones.
well, and we look at some of the camps that have been retrofitted over time, from a code standpoint, these mobile homes may have better compliance with codes than some of the older camps.
Oh, I would bet you.
But no one will ever say, take those and,
No.
you know.
Okay, so we're talking about actually scheduling some workshops, is that correct?
Yeah, I kind of, I think I communicated with you a little bit that, you know, we probably want to start that process because the moratorium ends in December? Is that 180 days?
I think so.
Yeah.
So we should probably get on it.
We should get on it, and whether we want to, at some point, we should have a public hearing just to get some public input. But I think the first piece of this we need to form is what would you want to see? I would suggest we have an open workshop where we kind of go through some materials. You've kind of given us some suggestions that you'd want to see some definitions from some other towns. Maybe see if we can get some other definitions of these different types of units. Maybe some correspondence from our legal. Is there anything else that we can have that we can just start getting some material out for the first workshop in September and then come back for the public hearing in October?
No, I think that's a good schedule. How does what's in the pipeline look at this moment?
For
We
projects?
obviously, yeah, for projects, we obviously have one that was tabled for, two that were tabled basically for tonight.
Right.
Those will be back in September.
Right.
I don't know if we got, some couple of our staff review, they didn't really.
Yeah, I haven't seen, again, things are booming, so, you know, my
You
hunch
just
is
don't
we're
know.
gonna start seeing some, either old subdivisions come back like this one, or some new ones even, but we haven't had any conversations with anybody.
Well, I think if we could get some materials together and do kind of an open workshop in September, no matter what the schedule is, and then move to a public hearing in October. That gives November, December. At
Right.
least there's an answer and some definitive material for the select board.
Right, because then you can have the planning board, the public hearing, sorry, in October, and then it gives you another month to kind of take that feedback
Right.
and see if we want to make any changes, or if we're on track, or we need to tweak it a little bit. Then we can hand it back to them in November,
Right.
or the end of November, and
And then they can make a determination about, a moratorium until the next town meeting, and
Right.
that should all fall into place.
Would we have anything to present to the public hearing at that time? That we
Well,
put
that's what
together, or-
we would take the information that you'd be looking at in September
Yeah.
and pull it together in some kind of public packet.
Okay,
Right.
so they would have something to comment on.
Right,
because
there'd be
now
something
they just have
available-
the
right.
moratorium, so
Right,
we'll
there'd be
get-
something available, some kind of packet available that they could see what we were discussing, where we're going, and that would.
Yeah, and the feeling I'm getting is we're not looking to prohibit, we're just looking to more clearly define various types of dwellings so that we know exactly where they fit in an existing ordinance.
And just so that everyone's clear what the requirements are for each one of those dwellings.
Right.
To what code they're built and to, what site features they're required.
That probably would, I don't know how many people would read it, but it would probably be very helpful to have at least reference material to send them back to the standards for a manufactured home, the standards for a mobile home. So, because all they're looking at is this concept of, an airstream, I think.
Right,
in their
because
minds.
if it's about noise or how their lifestyles are, we can't get into that.
Nope. Yeah,
But at least reference that those standards exist and they're easily accessible, I'm sure.
manufactured housing board would have some, as far as how they're constructed or how they're
Yeah.
placed.
Yeah. Because again, it says they meet the federal code, whatever that is, okay? At least we could give them a web reference where that code is.
Yeah.
So that people that really want to be informed,
Well, that and,
Can look.
that and how do they comply maybe even with NFPA or something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
health and
because
safety.
my only concern with all of it is again, environmental concerns and safety issues. And that, I think, is our job.
That's it.
Any other ordinance workshop you see?
Well, we know we got a short list going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just small tweaking here and there, with some words, some definition, a little maybe moves things around, a little clarity on some
Okay,
stuff
but
that we
you've
went
got,
into.
we've got time on that because it wouldn't go until June. So
Correct.
maybe we get this one done and then you move to the ordinance tweaking as you get into the dead of
I
winter.
think the recreational marijuana one will be one that probably get some guidance from legal on that anyway.
Yeah, The
Probably taking out your
moratorium,
hands.
yeah, the moratorium on the caregiver retail was not passed by,
Correct.
what, there was like 15 of us here that night. But, so that would fall under standard retail ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And a little bit of what's mandated by state for caregivers, for adult
Correct,
caregivers as
correct.
well.
But my understanding of the new legislation is that towns are automatically opted out of recreation unless they specifically say you want in.
I don't know for sure. I mean, I thought they gave them a choice as to whether they opt in or opt out. Not if they don't do anything, they automatically opt out. I think they
Yeah,
have to
I
vote.
think we're gonna have to see that,
Yeah.
the legislation.
But I think that will tumble down again from the select board.
I think so. I think, you know, that's something that we need to be prepared for. I think it is gonna come.
Mhm.
That's about the only one I'm aware of too, is that disc golf, but that has not moved.
Okay.
We do have a meeting scheduled with one of the wire people.
Okay.
He said it's a short one.
Any additional planner communications? I wanna kinda
No,
run
we
it
will
over.
have some, I do owe you a finding of fact for the one we just passed, Cedar Lane.
Yes.
I was hoping I was gonna be able to combine all these in one, but, we'll process that one, have that one ready for next
Okay.
meeting.
Any other issues for the good of the order? Do you have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Can I have a second? All in favor? Yo.